Welcome to Cultivated Live for Thursday, March 21st, 2024. I'm Jay Rosenthal, the co-founder of Cultivated Media and host of Cultivated Live. And since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be reader first. And those are the people in the industry, providing you with the most insightful, important, and useful information to our audience on a daily basis. We do that two important ways. One, our daily newsletter called Cultivated Daily. We hope that you will subscribe. There's a link in the show notes, but also through this daily live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube. So good to see you this morning. Today, after the news, we'll be joined by Krista Raymer, the founder and CEO of Vetrina, the foremost cannabis retail consultancy. We have a good one coming up, so hold tight for that. Here's what's driving today's news in the cannabis industry. Yesterday, 20 state attorneys general, that's the plural of attorney general, wrote a letter to Congress urging a crackdown on quasi-legal intoxicating hemp products, all according to Politico, this story. Now, here is part of the letter. The reality is that this law has unleashed on our states a flood of products that are nothing less than a more potent form of cannabis, often in candy form, that is made attractive to youth and children, with staggering levels of potency, no regulation, no oversight, and a limited capability for our offices to rein them in. Now, we know that intoxicating hemp-derived products are widely available throughout the country, gas stations, grocery stores, bodegas, and other places too. Now, companies selling these products are taking advantage of a loophole created in the 2018 Farm Bill, which legalized hemp production, defined as less than 0.3% THC in the US. It's just very difficult to classify these things and regulate these things when there are no regulations. Now, it's not immediately clear that the attorneys general want to see in the new Farm Bill, which may or may not get a vote in 2025. But the fact that 20 attorneys generals feel the need to lobby Congress on this issue means their concerns are likely to be heard next time the Farm Bill is up. So we will keep an eye on that. Now, outgoing Oregon Democrat Representative Earl Blumenauer, a longtime champion of cannabis reform, laid into Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra yesterday about the federal government's inability to pursue any cannabis reform. Now, he chairs the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, but he's actually not seeking re-election after his term is up this term. So, to quote Blumenauer and what he said, "I think it borders on political malpractice and beyond. This is an area that just breaks my heart," he said. This is discussing the research bill that President Biden signed into law in 2022, but is yet to be implemented. He continued, "We're still waiting, Mr. Secretary. This is an area that is profoundly affecting millions of people in the United States. We are denying opportunities for research that almost everybody agrees could be transformative, and we're not on the forefront of this research. There's no excuse for our not being in the forefront of something that's now legal for 97% of American public, and where people have a chance to vote, they vote to change the policies." So Representative Blumenauer not holding back when it comes to Secretary Becerra yesterday. And finally, from, let's say, rescheduling and research to safer banking, top leaders from both parties have indicated that Congress plans to move on the Safer Banking Act, a pretty narrow reform bill that would allow cannabis companies to access the financial system like any other legal industry. Recall that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer earlier in the year called it a very high priority. The chair of the Senate Banking Committee, Ohio Democrat Sherrod Brown, told a reporter that he hopes the Safer Banking Act will get passed this year, that according to a story in Marijuana Moment. And on the Republican side, the Republican House Majority Whip, Minnesota's Tom Emmer, told the American Bankers Association this week that he wants to see the bill passed. But the American Bankers Association lobbyist told Politico that the group is encountering, quote unquote, resistance to the banking bill, and informed Representative Emmer as such this week. Still, the lobbyist said that the bill has Republican fans in the Senate, so we will watch that as well. With that, I'm going to bring up Krista Raymer. There you are, Krista. Hello.
Jay, it's Thursday. We're back.
We're back. And I think we want to talk about, I'm going to try to phrase it. You're going to tell me what I've gotten wrong, which you often do. No. When I walk into a retail store, sometimes you don't even notice when they actually have their stuff together, meaning that, like, no matter who you talk to in the store, from manager to frontline salesperson to someone else, everybody speaks with one voice. They know what's going on in the store.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen in cannabis retail, unfortunately.
I mean, it doesn't always happen in retail.
That's true too. Yes.
Right. Like it's a really hard thing to do. It's like broken telephone. How many times does the message get shared and where does it break along the way?
Tell me why that's important. I mean, other than the obvious sort of brand perception of the store, but talk about why it's important from like an operations perspective.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've seen in working both in stores as well as with teams who are managing big groups of teams in stores is that there's a disconnect between the teams in the store understanding the why behind things and what is happening. So, why does our inventory and assortment look a particular way? Why do our promotions look a particular way? Why are we trying to sell these products to these customers? And that why ultimately influences ensuring that everybody is on the same page about like what success looks like. And what we specifically saw while we were on the sales floor watching kind of like bud tenders interact with customers is that they don't actually often get trained on the retail basics. So there's a lot of focus on KPIs, there's a lot of focus on how to service the customer, but there isn't necessarily the focus on what the KPIs mean and what you as a bud tender can do to influence them and where you might be accountable or like why you should be paying attention to the velocity of different SKUs and what that means for you as a bud tender because it's a very different thing from an inventory team member than for a bud tender, say for example, servicing customers.
So talk to me about what those KPIs, because I'm always curious about what's happening in retail, of course, cannabis, but otherwise too. What are like some of the things that, like, what are those KPIs? Like what that they should be measured on, or even like what is like retail 101, like non-cannabis or cannabis? Like what are the things people frontline need to know?
Yeah, so we built this course with Seed Talent basically to be able to share this information. And
I'm going to take it.
You're going to
I'm
take
going
it.
to take
Please
those.
do. Then tell us how it went. But the basically what we've done is broken it out into say we need bud tenders to understand some basic KPIs. It's helpful if they understand some things around how you measure the performance of inventory. Not necessarily that they need to do it, but just so that it influences how they understand how many SKUs are in store, for example. And then from a marketing and promotions perspective, that there's actually 3 different types of discounts and what that looks like. So if we get into the like KPI piece or the initial piece, the KPIs that every bud tender at this point has probably heard or has some awareness of is basket size and units per transaction. They're not necessarily always connected on how they can inflict change on those or where it might be important to be paying attention to them. So we talk about basket size and UPT for bud tenders. And then the other area that we talk about in the course is gross versus net revenue. Now, this is a big difference for most bud tenders because they don't think about the cost of goods of the inventory that they're selling. They just look at total sales numbers and are like, oh, my dispensary is making so much money. Like, why can't they pay me more?
Right.
And it's like they can't pay you more because there's no margin to pay you more with. And so what it does is create kind of like empathy and understanding, not to say that we shouldn't be paying our bud tenders more, but to say where are we in understanding how and the health and the performance of the business and where can we all contribute to that. If you have a team member that's engaged, they are much more likely to show up for you if they understand why you want them to show up in a particular way and why that's helpful to the business.
Yeah, because all those KPIs are important, but how they almost work together is almost more important, right? Like the basket size could be massive, lots of things in there, but if it's all low margin, this is like the next level thing. It's all low margin product, right? There's work to do.
There's work to do, and it's not so simple as just saying I have a $65 or $75 basket size, therefore I'm great. Is there an opportunity there? What does that opportunity look like? And how do you get your team, your frontline team, to understand what that looks like? Like if you have managers coming and being like, how do we get to 1.7 or 2 units per transaction consistently? Does the team that needs to sell in that way understand even what the manager is asking? Does the manager have the language to communicate how that is performing to their leaders? And that's where there's usually a disconnect is team members hear things like gross versus net and have no idea what that means for them on a day-to-day. And I think just creating clarity around some of those pieces, make sure that everybody can speak the same language.
And so you, the team at Vetrina, the Vetrinas, if you will, have put together a course. Talk to me about the course, how to access it, where it is, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's with Seed Talent. What we can do is we'll share the link. You can sign up. It's totally free. We've made it accessible to everybody that already has courses as well, accessible through Seed Talent. And it's a mix of both written as well as video content to explain these concepts, and really is for those budtenders who are in store, who are wanting to understand the retail basics more, or are on a path to be managers, making sure that they have the kind of the fundamentals before they keep building in their career. So it's the beginning parts of like getting to a store manager role.
Can I ask you a question about, because you obviously have much broader perspective than just cannabis, although that's sort of where you spend a lot of your time.
Yeah.
Do these types of courses across other sort of parts of retail, are they like everybody does them, or is it like only the best performers like put their staff through training like this? Like what is the experience in other parts of the economy?
I think that it totally depends on how the industry or the business relies on their team to connect with customers.
Mm-hmm.
What this looks like, you probably wouldn't see this level of training in, for example, most grocery stores. But you would definitely see this level of training in certain types of like retail clothing environments, or maybe even in a place like Sephora, where team members are going to understand the mechanics of a transaction, and also the mechanics of the profitability of a transaction.
Can I ask you a question about Sephora? Because I think that's sort of a hero retailer, certainly from
Mhm.
this, certainly from the perspective of trained staff. Um,
Mhm.
like, do you have any insight? Like, what does that training look like? It must be so extensive because there's so many products there. But just even understanding the gross versus net of a sale and basket size and units per transaction. Like, talk about what you know about that type of training, because that is like through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, their training is usually split into a couple different buckets. And there are the like why we are the business that we are, so that you talk about like cultural norms and the really the reason why the company exists. And then there is a portion that talks about product knowledge. And then there is the third bucket of like how you bring all these things together and why those things are important. And I think when you look at Sephora, you've got these three buckets covered over an extensive amount of time that doesn't just start and stop with onboarding. So the assumption isn't that when our team members start with us, they have like, for example, call it 90 days of onboarding, and then they're done their training. Training is like very consistent. They're consistently doing product knowledge moments and educational trainings, specifically with brands coming in and teaching everybody in store about how to talk about different products and like who might be the right customer for different products as well. And then that gets layered on top of like how you sell this, how you create trust with the customer. And that also evolves and builds over time too. So I think that's a big differentiator when you get into one of these other businesses is like, what's our cost of hiring somebody? What's our cost of onboarding? And how expensive is it for us to redo that process? What does it look like if we invest a portion of that back in maintaining our team members and keeping them? And Starbucks is a really great example of this as well, is doing a lot to make sure that their team members stay engaged for a long period of time, to ensure that they're not training somebody and then like having all the intellectual property just like leave with the team member after they've invested so much in onboarding that team member.
Yeah. I think for Starbucks is probably a good sort of training likeness for that. But thinking about Sephora and actually our friend, Trish Lackey, who I go back to the first time I ever talked to her, which is probably 100 years ago, when she was on the retail side of the business as opposed to the brand side of the business. Talking about, she came from David's Tea, which I don't even know if it's still around anymore, but she likened it to like someone comes in and they think they know tea, which is similar to cannabis, right? They come into the shop, they think they know tea, and then they are faced with a wall of loose teas at David's Tea. If those that don't know, is like a massive wall of loose tea, which is very daunting actually. And the
Yeah.
staff like walked you through the process, much like actually Sephora does. But my sense is that the folks behind the counter at David, certainly the folks on the floor at Sephora, understand the business a lot better than I thought they did, I think, right? In terms of like what products they want to move, what other like basket size, all the things, what is the most profitable thing there, because they were thinking about that while I was talking, right? Like, what are they going to put in that basket that I might actually want, additionally to
Yeah.
what I think I want? It is three-dimensional thinking within a dispensary store floor, and that I think is where successful retailers, the successful dispensaries differentiate themselves.
Yeah, I mean, your David's Tea example is a really good example of what budtenders do, but we don't always give them credit for, and that is to curate the options for your customer. Like, yes, you might have a 300 to 1,000 SKU menu, depending on what market you're in, right? And it is the budtender's role essentially to help connect the right products with the right customers. David's Tea had steps of service that essentially, like, you went in, they asked you some open-ended questions, it gave you some context. The team member would literally pull 3 canisters for
Yeah.
you. You would smell the 3. They would pick 3 very distinct options. Whichever one you liked the most, then they would dig into that and give you 2 more similar to that, then to be like, of this smell, what made sense? That isn't that doesn't just happen. That doesn't like just happen consistently. That is a trained opportunity within their both onboarding and ongoing training about like what are the 3 that you recommend the first time? How do you then open it up and present a couple more options? What does that physical process look like? Because at no point did you ever have like 12 canisters
No.
out on the counter,
But
right?
if you took the word tea out of that, like then you really, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very different kind of flow. And basically, what you're doing is training the team on how to sell. And one of the reasons why you train a team on how to sell is to connect better with the customer. Sales has a bit of an icky name with most bud tenders, and it's because they don't understand the implications or the importance of these transactions for the business, which is like why we came up with the Seed Talent courses to literally say, like, we are in this to have both gross as well as net sales. And we're going to start and open the door with some basic education as to why we might come to you and be looking to coach on how to sell better is because we need that for the business.
Yeah. And just for those that are on LinkedIn right now, Krista just posted where the Seed Talent Bud Tender training course is with Vetrina. So you can follow that. And I will post that on YouTube after the show so you can follow that as well. Yeah, I say this to you even when we're not live, but I do enjoy talking to you because it helps me think about what happens in store. This cannabis stores, but other stores too. And
Yeah.
sometimes when it goes great, like at David's Tea, the best scenario is you're not even thinking about it as a customer because it's
You
such a
don't
natural experience.
you don't like a great sales experience, it doesn't feel like a sales
Right.
experience. It's when it feels icky or like and robotic and you're like you're not talking about the things that matter to me. Customers are super ego driven. Like this is about me. I'm here to buy something for me or I'm here to make a decision for me for somebody else. And all of those things need to come together in a sale and how you connect with the customer. And so I think that that's where we start to lose pace is the product information that we're sharing with our customers relevant to the customer that's in front of us, or is it what we've trained everybody to know every single fact about the product?
Right.
It's different.
It's different. And then understanding the why of why the business operates the way it does, I think does alleviate some of the potential angst from a bud tender perspective. Why are you asking me to sell this thing?
Yeah, yeah. If we can get everybody on the same page with what are we selling, why are we selling it, and how can we connect the right product with the right customer at the right time, we would be in a much better place from a gross and net revenue. And so that's basically where the
And an
course
employee
starts.
retention, and I mean all those things. It's
All
win
of
win
the
win
above.
win 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 win.
Yeah.
Well, Krista, I say this every week. I've learned a ton in a relatively short amount of time. So thank you for making time this morning. I really I enjoy it. Thank you. I learned from you. We'll put a link to the Vetrina and Seed Talent Bud Tender Training course as we go. Thank you for making time. We'll see you next Thursday, Krista.
Yes. We're going to talk about pricing next Thursday.
Great. I need to know more about that because I know how important it is on the ground, and I see and we've talked about it. I mean, I never had everybody just matches prices of the cheapest store in the neighborhood, which cannot be the best business model.
We'll talk about that.
That just can't be because I know the corner store, the big one that has a massive chain, they don't need to make money on any of those products. They have a different business model than the like mom and pop shop on the corner. So we'll talk about that. And that's it for today's Cultivated Live. We encourage you to subscribe to our daily newsletter at cultivated.news. Follow us on LinkedIn, smash the subscribe button on YouTube. I'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. We actually have a great guest with us, the founder of Union Square Travel Agency in New York City, which is really cool. I can't wait to talk about the shop, the location, how it's going, their celebrity bud tender program, which has some of my favorite people that have already, I guess, sold cannabis is part of it. So we'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, LinkedIn, YouTube. Thank you again, Krista, for being with us today. Have a great Thursday, everybody. Remember, buy cannabis at your local dispensary and report back about how that experience was based on this conversation. Thank you again, Krista, and we will see you next Thursday.
Great.